Welcome to the Pirate Broadcast, where we interview interesting people doing interesting things, where you can expand your connections, your community. Kindness is cool and smiles are free. And let's get this party started. You know, we're going to learn about emotional intelligence on the Pirate Broadcast today with Irvine. Welcome to the Pirate Broadcast. Thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thank you. Thanks for the invitation. I'm excited to be here.
You know, the thing that we were talking about before the show is being inside a bar. And a lot of people don't think about emotional intelligence and bartending or being in a bar for that matter. And I would argue that that's one of the most educational places you can be to understand some of the emotional intelligence that you need in life. And so I want to kind of dig into that. But first, I want to talk about your backstory and how you started thinking about this and why you started thinking about this, because it's a heavy subject. It's an important subject. And a lot of people can benefit from this subject. Mm-hmm. So talk about the backstory and how this all evolved up until your book.
So actually, the backstory connects with the book as well. So I grew up in Northern Ireland. I am classically known as a child of the Troubles, and the Troubles are a euphemism we use for the outbreak of violence and almost civil war that happened in the late 60s and 70s. So I grew up in a society that basically was collapsing. It had turned tribal. Two sides were fighting each other, literally fighting each other in violent ways. And, you know, that really marked me in ways that I suppose I'm only coming to appreciate and realize, I think, as I grow older. Yeah. And I think it placed in my heart, it can't be like this. We can do better. And, you know, for me, that triggered a whole exploration of emotions. You know, it's emotions that drive us. And if only we could be more self-aware, if only we could explore the things that are driving us, even to the point of violence, then how much happier would we be and how much a better world would we have? So, I mean, I think that's really the genesis of how I started to explore emotional life and the importance of emotional life.
You know, it's really interesting that you would say that, because you know, there's a lot of challenges these days right now, and a lot of people are very polarized. And in some of this polarization, I believe, from my perspective, you know, and I've had a few experiences in my life, and it's really, what is it that triggers you? How and why is it triggering you? What's the emotional attachment that you have to this position, this idea, and this impact that you either feel like you're making or you're taking to the world you're living in? Yeah. And it's a reflection of your history, I think, is really important for us to think about and consider.
Absolutely. You know, I like to say, Russ, the way I say is that we all come from a narrative. You know, we use story to explain everything. We explain where we come from, our meaning, what we hold. And sometimes, you know, the narratives that we base our life are totally different. And if you can't move away from that, if you can't edge to putting on the shoes of another, then there's no way of breaking down the polarization. It begins with curiosity, of just being curious about another person and just asking some questions, because my belief is beneath the surface, we've all got the same pains. We've all got the same sufferings. We basically want the same things, and how we view those may be different, but at the core, it's the same. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's all important to feel like we're being heard as well. Yeah. And a lot of in the news, you know, there's so much noise that a lot of people don't feel like they're being heard or even understood, for that matter. And I think it's really important for us to think about how we can articulate our own thoughts and in our self-reflection, because that's one of the challenges a lot of people, I think, struggle with. And you know, sometimes it's not easy to unlock your own narrative and your own story.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, one of the things I like to say is, I said there's a physical hunger in the world in some countries, but
Yeah.
worldwide there is a hunger to be listened to,
Yeah.
and we have very few opportunities of encountering another human being who will give us their undivided attention. And when we have that, it can be transformative because, like you say, we begin to hear, our thoughts, etc. My mother used to say she could solve the problems of the world in a cup of tea. And what she meant with that is that people would knock at the door, she would bring them in, they would sit down in the kitchen, she'd make a cup of tea. And really what she was doing, she was just sat there and listened. And it's amazing the transformation that can happen.
It's interesting to see what can happen when you listen.
Hmm.
Listen with the intent to understand and not to respond.
Yeah. And just to be curious about this story that is coming out and to really immerse yourself in it. It's such a transformative experience.
So how did you transform yourself from being the troubles, as they say, to the bartender?
So I grew up in a pub. My parents owned a pub. And so my whole childhood was growing up in a pub. I was there from the age of 6. They started me early, you pick up the glasses. And it's funny, as a 6-year-old, you're walking around listening to all these conversations. And then I kind of graduated to begin to pour some beer, etc. And so that really was our childhood. We were touched very personally by it. At the age of 6, the pub and our home was destroyed in a bombing. And so we built it again. And so that whole business, was there in my life. Part of that desire to kind of, well, how do I respond to this? And so I've kind of said I've had different chapters in ways that I've tried to respond, but all at that core of connection. How do we bring people together?
Yeah. How do you generate the conversation rather than the conflict? Yeah. Absolutely. It's really amazing. I want to say hi to a couple of people that are in. Michael Hubicki. Good morning, Russ and Irvine. It's nice to see Michael here. He's helping thriving mayors, and he's doing a show that actually he and I have connected many times on his show, just development and getting that out there. Hyde Ives, another friend out of Houston, does a lot of great work. And Michael says, walk a mile in their shoes. And that's a great statement. And a LinkedIn user, I'm not sure. Good morning, Metro from Russ, Irvine Pirates. Thank you so much for being here. I love that you're here. And for anyone joining us today, we're talking to Irvine about emotional intelligence and how we can actually improve our outlook, ourselves, and some of the things around us, and how we can see a new perspective and generate some curiosity around the subject. So you were in bartending from an early age. It reminds me, I grew up in construction, and my dad always, took me to work, and I was always pulling nails or straightening. He'd say, go find all the nails on the job site, and if they're bent, straighten them out. It was more like, just stay busy. And real work throughout the day. And it's really kind of amazing, when you're able to grow up in that kind of environment, and your family's there, you're supported, and you feel like it's part of the process. It's part of the process. Mm-hmm. So how did that mold you as you grew older and started developing your own skills and deciding your own route and path in life?
Good question. So I'd say one of the things I learned in the pub is that everyone has their own story, that you never know. There's an expression in Ireland that we use that we say, if pubs weren't there, that we would need to triple the population of psychiatrists and counselors, because it was this natural environment where people could come and just talk. And the great thing about the pub is that you're not expected to be the perfect person. Yeah. Everyone's invited, warts and all. Yeah. And I think one of the things that ingrained in me was that the power of really appreciating that I only see the surface of a person, and that I need to explore what makes them tick, and to really appreciate the fact that people are deeper and come with their own pains and sufferings, and to really appreciate that, because it informs everything. So, that one of the ways that, as I kind of advanced my career and went on, I actually was a Catholic priest for 10 years. So that's the first way. And that was just a great experience. I did very untraditional work with Guatemalan refugees from the Civil War, and ran a Catholic Charities for a little bit. Wow. And then as I transitioned out, I started working with homeless youth who were aging out. And at that stage, I was also doing a lot of doctoral studies around emotional intelligence. And so then that catapulted me into my present work, which is working in leadership and organizations, and really helping leaders embrace the power of their emotion, and to really see it as an amazing skill set that can create connection. And I think business has changed, but the one thing that hasn't changed, it's all about connection, and it's all about making connections with other people. So, and at the core of that is emotional intelligence.
What do you find in your studies and, all of your life experiences? What is the most challenging piece to unlock that for an individual? I know a lot of people, struggle with being open and finding their own identity a lot of times. So what is it that you find is a common thread that might be something to reflect on for people that are looking to enhance their emotional intelligence?
So I think it all boils down to the core, and the core is the foundation, which is our self-awareness. And I think very often I encounter leaders who think they are more self-aware than they are. And it takes humility to get into a mindset that as a human person, I'm going to explore things about myself each and every day. And there never comes a point where I will know everything. I will continue to have glimpses, and as I grow and develop and become hopefully wiser. And so it's that humility to realize that there is so much more to know. And I find the better the leader, the more self-aware they are. And that's self-awareness.
So the relationship is they become a better leader because they're more self-aware, or they're a better leader because they are more self-aware? Which one comes first?
I think the more self-aware drives better leadership, because more self-aware means that they have tools then to get in place because of that awareness. More self-aware then also makes them curious about others and reading other people. And then they bring that to the relationship and the management of the relationship.
That's fascinating. I want to ask you a question, and it's one that I kind of reflect on, and I think that would be a great question to kind of for self-discovery is because this is one of the challenges that I've had in my past is, without describing what you do, describe who you are.
And the question to answer, do you want me to answer that question?
Yeah.
I am a person of passion who constantly seeks a deeper connection.
And the reason I asked that question is because as we talk about leadership, and we talk about self-discovery, and we talk about self-awareness, there are so many people that are attached to their job and their income and their status and their stuff, when that's probably the least important part of life.
Totally. Yep. Couldn't agree more.
However, a lot of people, if you ask them who they are, they say, well, I'm a CEO, or I'm a whatever, fill in the blanks. They give their title. They don't say who they are.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Or
I
even
think
that,
that's important. I think that's an important discovery.
yeah. Oh, absolutely. Because we wrap so much, because if we've invested so much in that identity, then anything that challenges that, anything that risks moving us away from that, we become defensive, or we just don't even want to look at it.
Yeah.
And and then you get locked and trapped. It's like, I've met, I'm sure you have, people who are reflecting back, and they say, God, how did I get here? And it was time passes so quickly. How did I get here? Why didn't I make another choice? Is this it? Is this all there is?
Yeah. What is the next chapter in the book of life, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you finished or ended your time in the church, being a priest, what was the transition like for you at that point in time?
That's an interesting question, because there you have a profession where it's totally, your identity is wrapped up in this role.
Right.
And it was scary. It was a risk. And I think, thankfully, something within me and my heart, I listened to my heart and I said, you know what? You can be safe and continue, but you're not going to be fully fulfilled.
Yeah.
And thankfully I listened, but it was a very scary proposition.
Yeah.
Because of that role. It's like, oh, who am I apart from that?
There's a lot of expectations, right?
Yeah.
A lot of pressure.
Yeah.
So then you had an opportunity to study, reflect, and grow into the role of, personal development and some of the things you're doing now. So talk about your book. When did you start writing your book, or when was the seed planted for your book?
So I do a lot of executive coaching, or did a lot of executive coaching. And one of the things that kept coming to the conversation were just issues in relationship, issues of communication, issues in turnover, issues in people being dissatisfied with the working environment. And so this is like, God, there has to be another way. There has to be something. And part of that was, I know it's emotional intelligence, but how do I express that?
Yeah.
And I actually had a trip to Ireland planned. I mapped out a few things. I've still got family over there. Landed in Dublin, and actually, something just moved me to change my plans. And I decided to go to my childhood places and just be there. And the story emerged that it was just, wow. I said, this place, this institution that has been around for hundreds of years, has lessons to teach us. Because here you have a place where people voluntarily go. They call it their local.
Yeah.
They have an attachment to it. People go there. They are vulnerable voluntarily. They tell stories about themselves that are self-revelatory. They trust, and there's laughter, and there is crying, and there's all this mixing pot of humanity where you can see a CEO sit next to a welder, sit next to a farmer, and they're having a conversation.
Yeah.
So it's this unique place. And one of the things that was interesting was very little research done in it. Very little research done in it. And I said, this place has lessons that are important for us to be aware about.
Don't you find that fascinating that you can create a learning experience in almost any environment, but that environment is so rich because of the diversity, the conversations, the position, and the passion that people have, and desire to actually be connected. And it's just really interesting right now to see how limiting we are because of our circumstance in life right now in 2020, 2021, that a lot of people are craving that connection, that conversation, that passion, and the ability to actually voice some ideas and connect with other people. And it's civilization is built around this principle of, community and storytelling.
Yeah.
And I think that the pub and the place is such a rich environment for that.
Yeah.
And right now it's we're all kind of struggling a little bit in that environment. So how's the environment? You're in Washington, D.C. So how is the pub environment in Washington, D.C. compared to European cities and your environment and what you've seen around the world?
Yeah, so it's really interesting, in the Irish and British sense, there is a sense where the pub is I would say primarily community and secondarily a place where you go and actually have a drink. My father used to say, I'm not in the business of selling drinks. I'm in the business of creating a home. Very interesting insight.
Yes.
And so I think there's a tradition there of this. It's almost a community center. In Washington, I think some pubs do that better than others.
Yeah.
And I think what makes it the community is, I think the leadership, the barman, the barwoman, the owner, and then this attachment, this growing attachment of people who go there. It's their local, and you'll always find that you're in a great pub. Whenever I always say, great pubs can widen the circle, so that when you come in, you're invited into the circle. It's not like you're here. Great pubs, if you go to a pub in Ireland, you'll sit down and in 5 minutes, someone's going to talk to you. And now you may be annoyed, like, leave me alone. But it's really, it's a sign of, no, come into the circle. We want you to be included. And that's
I'm the one that has conversations at the grocery store. It's like, I'm always curious. It's like, okay. But I really thrive. I spent years in the bars as a musician, playing music, being involved in the activities of things. And you're absolutely correct. And I hadn't really thought of it, pictured it that way. It's the culture of the place. And every single place you go to like that has its own culture and its own invitation.
Yeah. So
some people are closed and most people are open to having conversations. And once they see that you're harmless and you're okay, then, the conversation can start. But it's really interesting to see it and frame it that way. I think and the insight from your father, is really, really important to understand. I think that's a great way of looking at life as well. I want to say hi to Ken. Ken's here. Hey, Russ. And from Malta, Michael says, thanks, Russ, for the generosity and leadership. Irvine is an awesome pirate. Absolutely, positively. It all starts from awareness, Ken says. What you don't know, you don't know. Absolutely. That's very wise. And Ken says, could it be that in a pub there is a sense of community and acceptance without judgment that makes them feel comfortable?
Yeah.
I would have to say absolutely. Positively.
Yeah. I mean, with Ken, just to the extent that, people will tell very vulnerable stories. They'll tell stories about how they messed up. In the book, I have a few of how they totally messed up, and people laugh, but they were never laughing at. They were laughing along with, and there was this realization, yep, I could have done that all by myself as well. And so this community created vulnerability.
Yeah. I mean, my experience in bars, I've had conversations with from criminals to CEOs and everything in between.
Yeah.
And people are still people. Ultimately, they're still people. Yeah. Some adventurers, people that have traveled the world, and people that have never left a town. And it's really fascinating to me that we're not that much different. And so I sit back with curiosity and wonder why in today's day and age, and I have my own thoughts, that people are so polarized. And that's a different subject for a different show. However, I just think it's interesting that, and it goes back to self-awareness.
Yeah. And
being able to have a little humility, remove the ego from the equation, and dive down and say, ultimately, there's some broken parts of me, and I can always improve. and this is the journey that I'm on. And if I can be a better person tomorrow than I was yesterday, then I feel successful in life.
Yeah.
So
I think. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, yeah, and I think part of that as well, the only other element is conversation. People are not talking to each other.
Yeah.
So not only we're polarized, but we're polarized in our world. We listen to news that confirms what we think and feel. We talk to people who think like us. And there's a comfort in that. There is a safety in that. There's a confirmation in that. But unless we're willing to begin conversation with others that not even challenge us, but just give us another perspective, and then that's where polarization begins to end. But it has to start in conversation.
Absolutely. So Ken, talk about your book. Tell us. I want to put up a banner here that show how people can get a hold of it on your website. So talk a little bit about the book and what your goal and your mission is in training and coaching and some of the things that you're doing in life to help other people achieve their self-awareness.
Yeah. So my passion, my goal is to help people see the superpower they have in their emotions, that our emotions sometimes are looked upon. That's like, oof, they get me in trouble, etc. But the emotions are part of our DNA, and they help us build connection. They help us keep us safe, and they help us influence. And so part of my mission is to help people become aware of emotional intelligence and to take practical steps. The great thing about emotional intelligence is this: I can be 94 and begin to develop it, and I can be 15 and begin to develop it. It's an opportunity no matter what age we are. And I promise you the decision to expand our emotional intelligence means that the next day we're going to be a little more aware and a little happier. So part of it is giving, and I'm a great believer, Russ, in practical tools, helping people have exercises. So the book it's got 7 lessons around something in the pub, but at the end of every chapter, there's questions to reflect upon. And then there's a link to an online course that they can download, tools, etc. I want people to really practice this, because that's how emotional intelligence grows. And part of the work that I do with organizations and leaders is precisely that, is helping them see the power of their emotions and how that can create more human workplaces.
I love that. So what's one thing that I could practice? I practice gratitude every day. So if I want more emotional intelligence, what would I add to that?
Wow, great question. I've got so many. Let me choose one. I would just say, let me do about polarization. And I would just say, there's a little exercise I do, what's called Who's in My Circle? And it's just a thought about who do I talk to most? And just be curious about that. And then ask one question: who could I add to that circle that might help me see the world a little bit differently? And I think that's a powerful question to ask, because the wider our circle, the more diverse our circle, it really helps us begin to see the world with different eyes.
I love that. I love that. And what struck a chord with me while you were saying that is, what came up was, who could I reach out to on a regular basis and just surprise or start a conversation with them? Somebody that that you haven't talked to in a while, that you just have to nurture. You continue to nurture and have people in your life that can actually allow you to feel and grow and see a new perspective. And every conversation is unique in that respect. And I just love that. Thank you so much for being here. I really,
Thank you.
Ken says, could it be in a pub that there's a sense of community and acceptance without judgment that makes them feel comfortable? Yes. I want to remind people that you can make these connections. You can reach out to people. And I love the idea. We pirates love to embrace our emotions. Wendy says, welcome to the pirate posse, Irvine. EQ equals happy pirates. So.
Amen to that.
Well, thank you so much for being here. And the reason we're here is to make those connections, start those conversations. So how do you like people to connect with you?
Feel free to either link in with me. I always love people connecting on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook, and my website is there. My email address is irvine@irvinenugent.com. So use whichever one there, and let's begin the conversation.
Well, thank you so much for being here. And as always, everyone, thank you, love you, and thank you so much for being here. And like, comment, and share in all the social activities that help us grow and share this message out with somebody that needs it today. Because, you know, kindness is cool and smiles are free. So you enjoy the day. Take care. Thank you for joining the Pirate Broadcast. If you found this content valuable, please like, comment, and share it across your social media channels. I would love the opportunity to help others grow in their business. The Pirate Syndicate is a platform where you show up, we produce the show. It's that easy. If you want to be seen, be heard, and be talked about, join the Pirate Syndicate.